The Social Media Union Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the Social Media Union podcast. I am your host, Jenna, the founder of Social Media Union. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really pleased to have you here. We've got someone really interesting here today. This is Alice. Hi, Alice. Really nice to meet you. Please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hello. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I was just saying before we hit record, it's such a treat to call this work, basically just sitting and having a chat. So lovely to be here. If people aren't familiar with me, my name's Alice Benham, and my main work is as a business and marketing strategist, which I always think sounds really fancy, but basically just means I help business owners, much like the people that are listening, grow their businesses by implementing whatever strategy they need in order to get there. So I do a lot of work around the foundations, helping people to get really clear on where they want to be, who they are, and then focus a lot on marketing strategy, systems and processes, productivity, time management, diversifying business models, basically anything that sits under the business and marketing strategy umbrella. I help people to do it. So I love my work. I work primarily one-to-one with people and really focus in on sustainable and value-driven growth. So not a fan of quick fixes or overnight success or blueprints. None of them really exist. Or if they do, they're not sustainable. So yeah, try and help people to kind of get where they want to be in a way that feels good to them. So that's my main work. And then I also run another business called On Paper, which is a stationery shop for business owners and creatives. So I was noticing a lot of people struggled to set goals, stay organized, manage their time. I started creating my own tools to help me to do that. And then I started selling them for other people to use as well. So those two things keep me very busy. Also have a podcast, and I will stop the list there because otherwise I'm just going to keep rambling about all the things.
As a heads up, just absolutely love your Instagram account. It is so beautiful. The branding is absolutely gorgeous, like really right up my street. So I really just recommend for everyone to go and check that out for sure. And I'm obsessed with stationery. Like obsessed with stationery, so like a dream day out for me is like there's a store called Paper Smiths in Brighton, which I just absolutely love. I could just stay in there all day and I love it and spend all my hard-earned pennies in there. So you are a woman after my own heart, having a stationery company. Maybe that'll be next for me after Social Media Union.
It's a lot of fun. Or maybe an On Paper Social Media Union collab, content planners, metric tracking note. Like I see a vision here. I think we can make something happen.
Oh my God, you're listening to that live, that kind of that break
that is
like,
a promise.
light bulb moment. Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. So first question I have for you, we've got 3 questions for you really on marketing strategy today, because you started life in social media. So you are very much with what our listeners go through kind of on a day in and day out basis, which, as we all know, is a lot working on social media. So first question is, so our listeners will already be familiar and likely have written a fair few marketing strategies in their careers. But what can you tell our seasoned professionals about creating an effective social media marketing strategy? And kind of second part to that really is there anything you're surprised to see from people like us? Because we should know better. We know all the principles. Sometimes we kind of skip over them. Sometimes we miss them. But, you know, what are the really important elements of the strategy that we should know about?
It's a great question, and one I definitely resonate with asking, because as you mentioned, I stepped into business as a social media manager. I was 17, I'd left school early, and I was, through a very roundabout kind of accidental turn of events, became a social media manager freelance. And I remember being in a meeting very early on, and someone said to me, "Hey Alice, you need to build our marketing strategy." And I remember just hearing those words and being like, I have no clue what that means. Like, up until this point, I've been following the conversation. You know, we're talking about building community, selling, serving, content, like that all makes sense. And then suddenly this title was thrown out there, and I was like, this just suddenly feels really overwhelming. Like, in my head, I was like, I don't know what that is. Is that some fancy spreadsheet? Is that some huge document? And no word of a lie, I remember going to the bathroom halfway through that meeting and just Googling, what is a marketing strategy? And in honesty, I still sometimes find myself Googling that question, because even as someone who helps other people with their marketing strategy, I feel like it's such a buzzword. and something that we just throw about without really understanding or just reminding ourselves of what it's really about. So I guess the place I'd begin is for us all to remember actually what is a marketing strategy. So if we kind of pull the two words apart, marketing, I'm sure we'll all have a slightly different definition of, but it's basically just when you're using the voice of a business to build an audience and meet an end goal. So sell something, product, service, build a community, whatever your end thing is. And then that other word, strategy, I think that's the one that makes it feel overwhelming, doesn't it? It's like, oh gosh, what's a strategy? That feels really fancy. But if you Google it, a strategy is just an action plan that has an end vision in mind. So if we combine those two words back together, well, a marketing strategy is an action plan for your marketing that achieves the long-term vision of your business. That's all a marketing strategy is. So actually the way that you do a marketing strategy is completely up to you. And I wouldn't normally say that if I was speaking to an audience of kind of, normal business owners. I'd probably give them okay, here's maybe step 1, 2, 3 of building a strategy, because you'll benefit from that. But the people listening to this, they're experts, right? So all I'd encourage you to think about when it comes to actually what is a strategy is how can you create the best action plan possible that's going to help you take action towards that long-term vision. Whether that's figuring out content pillars, whether that's, mapping out your platform strategy, looking at the different kind of, tone of voice that you have, thinking about your brand identity. Obviously, all those things are going to be important to most of us. But yeah, I guess that's where I'd begin, is remember what a marketing strategy really is, which is just an action plan. And as long as it's helping you take action towards the vision, doesn't matter if it's a 50-page document, doesn't matter if it's a scrap piece of paper, doesn't matter if it's a spreadsheet. It's not about making a strategy, it's about using it. So think about how it can fulfill that purpose, not how it can tick a box. That was very wordy, but I think that would be where I would begin. And then to answer your second question of kind of common mistakes I see people making, or things that I think are easy not to think about, I guess the first thing to say here is I see it a lot that we don't build strategies that are made with our capacity in mind.
Oh,
I think
so true. So true. All my clients, it's the first question I have them is, I can put in all the fancy stuff that you want, but how much time have you had? Because you've only got 2 hours to dedicate to social media every week, then there's no point in me giving you all of this. Or sometimes you deliver a strategy and they're like, well, where's all the, where's the rest of the kind of like blue sky thinking? You're like, well, you only have 3 hours a week. So this is realistic and this is what's going to help you towards your goals. So I'm very pleased to hear that that's not just me.
No, I am, banging that drum with you, because, it's all well and good being ambitious and creative, and we want to do the best we can, and we want to do all of the things. And, one of the most amazing things about marketing is there's so much you can do. But if you set yourself up to do everything, you're likely going to end up doing nothing. And that is because often as business owners, we have this all or nothing mindset. I'm sure we can all resonate with it in different ways, where if we aren't achieving perfection, if we're not doing all of the things in the best way possible, our brains go, okay, well, I may as well not do it at all. And like immediately then we've lost the point of what marketing is. Effective marketing isn't perfect marketing. It's messy, consistent marketing. And I say messy alongside consistent because I think even consistency is a big thing to ask for. Like, I don't think I've ever been perfectly consistent, but I try every day just to be as consistent as I can be. And the biggest way that I make sure I can be consistent is I set myself up for success. In the same way that it's unhelpful to write a to-do list that assumes I've got 10 hours in the day when I've only got 6, it's unhelpful to build a marketing strategy that, as you've said, assumes you have 6 hours in a week when actually you have 3. And yeah, I guess that's my main point there, is when you're building a strategy, think about what capacity have I got, not just in terms of time, but also in terms of headspace and, if you need loads of images and video for your strategy, but you don't have any way of getting images and video, then you maybe need to rethink if that strategy can actually be implemented. So be really honest with yourself when you're getting to kind of the detail of it, how much are we showing up and where, on what's feasible for you. And the beautiful thing is, as your strategy begins to work, it's going to buy you more time, or it's going to buy you money that allows you to then invest in team that can do more stuff. So you can always scale it up, but you may as well start small and sustainable and then scale it up from there. And then just the final kind of second thing I'd say that I notice us not doing within a marketing strategy is outlining the implementation process. And I guess this is most important when we're handing it over to a client, even if we're doing it collaboratively with them, is that we focus the strategy on kind of, what's the plan and what are we going to do? We think about the platforms we're going to show up on and the content pillars and the format of content, but then we leave it there. And then that kind of leaves us to the question of like, okay, well, what now? How do we go from having a strategy to it actually being used? So this implementation process, I think, is a really important final step where we outline, on a day-to-day basis, what are we doing that takes this strategy from a spreadsheet to an Instagram feed? When am I planning content? How am I gathering ideas? Am I scheduling stuff? Am I batch creating? How are we actually getting from strategy to the content actually being posted? And I guess those 2 points go hand in hand, because you need to make sure that process you actually have the time for, which then helps us to see what's going to be sustainable. I feel like I fully just rambled, but I hope something in there made sense.
It's so, and it's so useful talking to someone like yourself, and I really hope the listeners feel the same way about listening to us talk about this, because actually there's so many things in there which I have been doing. There's definitely some that I can certainly take and implement into my own working life with social, but actually it's often just really nice to go, oh, okay, I'm doing the right thing. Like the last page of any strategy I ever create is it's a daily, weekly, monthly columns.
I love
and
that.
then it's just like, this is what you need to do every day, 15 minutes, Instagram engagement, creating a report, whatever, like goes in the back of this. It's just often my find is just like that confidence to know that you're doing the right thing. And often, especially working in social, we are genuine, like often in very small teams, so you're not really talking to people on the outside. I mean, hopefully, obviously, social media union is going to help change that, but we're often not talking to someone else that might be as experienced in what we're doing as people in the rest of your team. The other thing I was going to say to that actually is we're talking about like delivering a marketing strategy for a client, but actually if you're working in house, it's much of the same lessons. And actually your client is almost your line manager or your head of marketing, who's obviously looking at loads of different areas, and yours is just social perhaps. So I think it's when you're creating that strategy, the best advice like I could give is to say to your line manager, go, okay, well, this is what I can realistically achieve with my time. And do not ask me to do any more. It is not possible, because they'll always keep pushing. But here's an option if we had somebody else on the team. This is what we could achieve. So if actually you want to grow your team, then that's a great way to do that, and have that almost secondary part of a strategy to go like, so they know that you've considered the realism versus, okay, this is what we could do in 6 months or a year if we had a larger team and there was just generally more hours in the day, i.e. more people. So second question that I have for you is, so this was quite a niche one, and I wasn't sure about asking it, but I'm going to go for it anyway, because actually I think it's quite important. So often social media teams, this is really specifically in house, are not brought into the room, and there's a wider marketing strategy being created or has been created, or perhaps someone started a role once a marketing strategy has been created. What is your best advice in that scenario, like making the most of a strategy that's already been created that you've had absolutely no input into whatsoever?
It's a great question, and one that I come across quite a lot when I'm working with teams within wider companies. I don't work with big companies, but in startups it happens a lot where kind of someone's brought in to do social media strategy, and I don't always know how much these people actually understand what that role is. First of all, the amount of times I see job ads for social media managers, and I'm like, you really don't get what a social media manager can
100%
and should be doing. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes,
I mean, I
yes,
guess
it is.
it's dependent on the situation, right? In terms of how much control do you have. The route I would suggest going down is tweaking what you can from an initial standpoint. And I don't know if there's a right or wrong here, so some people might disagree with this, but I would say let the results speak for themselves if you really don't think that that strategy is good. Like if you had been handed a strategy and you know, because of perhaps the way that your manager is or the way the company operates, that you do not have the scope to massively change that, and they might not listen to you saying, hey, this is a bad strategy, we need to do this, this, and this. First of all, that's bad. They should be listening to you, but I know that's not always the case, that they do listen. I think implement it consistently so that you have the results, or more often lack of results, to show them that it's not working. And then you're in such a strong position to show them, hey, well, the plan you gave me isn't quite working because XYZ. Here's what it would look like to take a plan forwards that would work based off of what we've learned from that. I think in marketing, we often see it that like, if we get the result that we wanted, we've succeeded. And if we don't get the result, we failed. But actually marketing is just a big experiment. So if the strategy doesn't work, you have still succeeded because you have got data, you've got information, and you can then use that data and information to fuel the next strategy and the next plan. Now, obviously, I'd say best case scenario is you have a line manager and a team environment and a culture where you can just say to them, look, I don't think what you've handed me is good. Do you trust me to try a different approach? And then we can review. If you're able to do that, do that. But what I'm saying, I guess, is if you're not able to do that, tweak what you can with what you've got, but start implementing it as soon as you can. And sooner or later, it will be clear to them perhaps why that strategy isn't working. I know that's such a horrible position to be in, isn't it? When you're implementing something that you kind of know is a bit broken, but
we had one with a client a couple of years ago, and obviously not naming any names, and it was just exactly that scenario, and they were just like, follow this strategy, and I'm looking at it like, whoever's written this, like, God bless them, but they had no idea about social media, or like the practical application of social media, I guess, and like using those platforms, and it didn't really fit with their goals or anything like that. So it was just like a very gentle shift. They were quite defensive about it, and that was absolutely fine. And I think it's just like any tricky scenario in life, it's just finding that balance and how you can just kind of steer people in the right direction, perhaps without them really knowing what you're doing.
yes, yeah. And the benefit of people, I think, sometimes like, in, you know, wrongly, I don't agree with this, but kind of seeing social media as a separate department to marketing. They're like, you know, they're off doing their TikToks or whatever. Like, use that to your advantage if you can.
Yes. Yeah.
I had a
you took the words out of my mouth. Yeah.
You know, be the sneaky one that's making TikToks when they don't know. I had a client who had that. She was in a quick moving startup and they wouldn't advocate for using TikTok, but they never said she couldn't. So she got all of the other things done that they wanted her to do. And then she went and cracked on and made TikToks. And after a month, she'd grown their TikTok account to tens of thousands of followers. And then they listened. So I think it's that dance, isn't it, of working out, right, what control can I kind of carve out for myself? And how can I, like you said, kind of gently nudge them towards the right direction, knowing that ultimately, I think, especially for kind of marketing managers and people top level, they like numbers and results. So whether it's a negative number or a positive number, the more that you can back up any change you want to make with that, I think they're then going to be warmer to it.
And that's so many of our clients over the years. What I've learned in my many, many years in this industry is, with most people, if you just show them how much money it's making and that it's growing every month, they'll kind of just let you do whatever you want to do, because fundamentally they're, you know, yes, they're interested in number of followers, always way too obsessively, in my opinion. But really what they care about is the bottom line. And you just know the 25-page report you've spent hours creating every month, all they're doing is probably flicking straight to the analytics and conversions page, and that's it. That's kind of like all they're interested in. So the next question that I have for you is, and actually this is quite a selfish one, because it's one that I often forget that I've created a strategy and sort of a few months into working with someone, I'll go, what am I gonna post about? And I'm like, oh my God, I have a strategy like that I spent all that time on, and you kind of revisit it and go back to it. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's past me created some really good ideas here for content. Like, thank you very much. So question is, how best to revisit an existing strategy to make sure it and your actions remain current and not gathering dust? So basically, how do you kind of avoid on an ongoing basis doing exactly what I do all the time?
And I think you're not alone with that. And something that you might do, I notice a lot of people do it, I have a tendency to do it myself, is then when we do revisit our strategy, we want to rip it up and completely change it. And I
Yeah.
get why we can want to do that. You know, if it's not working, the temptation can be, right, let's just completely change tack, let's go in a different direction. And also marketing, like, I love it, but I hate it. It's so quick moving. There's always a new
Mm,
trend, always a new thing that's working, always a new platform, or at least it feels that way, to kind of be
yeah.
jumping onto. And the biggest encouragement I give to anyone when it comes to marketing is to give things time before you change the strategy. Like,
Yeah.
if you, after 2 weeks, are deciding your strategy isn't working and it needs revisiting and revamping, you haven't given your strategy enough time to prove to you whether
Mm,
it can work or not, because you haven't given it enough consistency of implementation. So, what I would encourage people to think about is, how can you have a kind of rhythm or habit in your business where every few months, I think quarterly is a really nice rhythm. So, every 3 months, you are revisiting the strategy, and you're not massively changing it. You're not kind of ripping up the whole thing, but based off of results. You know, what have you learned over the last 3 months? What's worked? What's not? What's felt good? What's not? What are you know, questioning and thinking about? You tweak a few things. If you change everything and then the results change, you're not going to know what change led to that different result. Whereas if you tweak, you know, one thing per platform every 3 months, you're going to very clearly see what is and isn't making a difference. And, you know, sometimes there'll be big changes, like, okay, this quarter we're going to bring TikTok in, or this quarter we're going to kind of completely change our content strategy. But sometimes it will just be tiny things, like, oh, I noticed that when we use that kind of cover on the reel, it works really well, so let's use those for the next quarter. Or when we use that
yeah.
button language on the email, that gets more click throughs. Like, really listen to what your action has told you, because it's all data, like I said. And when we don't listen to that data, we don't improve the strategy. We just keep doing what we've always been doing, which is okay, but it's not great, right? So yeah, I'd say have a, you know, especially if you've got multiple management clients, have a moment that you sit down every few months where you take a step back, look at what you've learned. You know, if people are doing reporting every month, that should be helping to inform the changes you make to your strategy, and then make those small tweaks that matter. And I guess a final thing to say about that is, make tweaks that are going to contribute to what your goals are. Like you said, we can get so caught up on like follower growth or audience numbers or kind of those big metrics. Every strategy should begin with clear goals and vision. So look at the metrics that indicate those goals are being met. Like, an example of this is, my goal with my podcast at the moment isn't to grow it, but is to drive more traffic from the podcast to my email list and my website. So actually, I'm not interested right now in looking at download number. If it goes up, if it goes down, you know, unless it's a massive change, I'm actually just ignoring that metric, because my current goal isn't to do with that metric. My current goal is all about traffic and conversion. So I think when you're looking at metrics, look at the ones that align with the goals that you've set out, and then you'll know that the changes you make are going to help contribute to that goal and that vision that you've already explained.
So great. Thank you so much. I just love listening to you. It's
I
so
hope that
interesting. I
made
like
sense.
almost forgot to keep talking. I was just like, oh, and this is so interesting. So I think the one thing I was just going to add to that is, with strategy, and again, like probably preaching to the converted here, but I think it's also like not getting carried away either with new trends, or also or what your in-house team or your clients are telling you that they want. So we have a client who, there's been a big push on Instagram and TikTok, and really wanting to do more and more and more of this. And whilst we get it, when we look at conversions, 98% of the e-commerce conversions come from Facebook still. It's huge. It's a massive audience for them. So yes, we can do all the cool, new, really exciting things, and reels and TikToks, and they take so much time to get the content, create them, and all this kind of stuff. And actually, our key goal is to sell more. So do we really need to be creating these when actually they're not really generating income? And maybe they will over time, but certainly for the last year they haven't. And they do really well. The engagement rates are insane, but it's about not getting carried away with those kind of like almost like vanity metrics and going,
Yeah.
actually, what's the bottom line on this and what's actually making the money?
Yes.
And I think Facebook often gets forgotten that it's kind of this, oh, just don't, schedule a post on it, whatever. Depending on obviously who your audience are, like it's still such an important platform for so many people, and certainly for anyone we've worked with recently, it's where they're still making the most money.
Mm.
So, what else was I going to say on that? I was also going to say to certainly to listeners is don't forget that that's what the SMU forum is for. So head on to Discord, and if you want to make tweaks to your marketing strategy, to your social strategy, and it's things, perhaps that you're not sure about how to kind of propose it to a line manager or to a client, or you just run it past the rest of kind of the experts within this community, then that's exactly what Discord is for. Make sure you put those things in there. It's obviously a completely private space, and everyone is instructed very much not to share outside of the community. So, head in there, share things, run ideas past people. That's exactly what it's there for. Okay, so I have one last question for you, and this is a question that we ask everyone, and I'm always a little bit self-conscious about it because I think on paper it sounds like a really boring, dry question, but it's something that I'm actually genuinely find like really interested in and find really fascinating.
Hmm.
So, who or what is your favorite? I'll start that again. What's your favorite personal brand to follow on social media and why?
Good question. And I'm glad I knew about this in advance, because otherwise I'd probably be sat here for the next 5 minutes just umming and ahhing. I'm so disloyal. I fall in love with different accounts pretty much every other day.
Same.
A brand that I have been watching for the last year and I'm just fascinated by, I don't know if you've seen them, but they're called Thursday Dating. And they
Oh
are a new
no.
dating app launched about 10 months ago. My housemate and close friend Jess is actually their digital creative lead, and the founder was on my podcast a few years ago. So I've kind of been like watching them almost from behind the scenes, and they are fascinating. Like they have just captured what it means to market in a creative way. Like I don't even know how their brains operate. If anyone's familiar with their marketing, you know what I mean. But like they will, they did a stunt last week where they went out on the streets. They handed out sex toys inside Easter eggs as like an Easter activation. They'll like walk around
Amazing.
central London with like billboards on themselves. They get like speed dating set up on the street. They're so creative, and they really cleverly blend like in-person activations with online conversations. So they
Brilliant.
blend the two really nicely. They create so much user-generated content. And if you ever want to see how to use LinkedIn well, they are a brand to look at. Look at their co-founder George Rawlings and Jess Reeford, who's their digital creative lead. Those two on LinkedIn is like a sight to see. They go viral all the time. They're always taking over people's LinkedIn feeds, and people don't always love what they do, but they always start conversations, and they're just so interesting to observe. And I think if there's a lot of marketers listening to this and you're on LinkedIn, you've probably seen Thursday talked about a lot, because yeah, a lot of people are kind of interested, sometimes not a fan, sometimes a fan, of kind of the way they do things. So very long and wordy answer, but go and have a look at Thursday Dating and George and Jess on LinkedIn, because they are one to watch. I think
Okay, so
you'll never quite know what they're going to do next.
that's the first thing I'm going to do as soon as we finish recording is go and check them out. I just really love hearing about like, because obviously the internet is big, so there's so many people that I follow, and when I mention them to other people, they just say never even heard of it. Like I've never even heard of Thursday Dating, and so
Mm,
your corner of the internet, like you feel like other people must know about them and they just don't. So it's really cool to kind of pass those on.
yeah.
We also encourage people in the forum to share like the really interesting accounts to follow. So head over to the forum and kind of chuck them in there. Say if you have your own ideas, and I'll make sure to put in Thursday Dating in there and some of the links, so everyone can kind of easily go and check those out.
Amazing. And if people do want to hear, this is like a very subtle self plug, but not in a self plug way. George and Jess were on my podcast this week. So if you want to hear like their behind the scenes, they're very interesting marketers. I think they approach things in basically the complete opposite way to me. Like they've got no strategy, they're just making it up. They're not afraid to upset people. It's an interesting listen. So if you're interested by Thursday, that could be something that people.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Well, the last thing I was going to say to you is just share with the listeners where they can find you on social media, and feel free to plug whatever you want to plug. So where can they find you? Where can they follow you? Let us know.
Absolutely. So my main two hangouts are Instagram and LinkedIn. I am like a newfound love for LinkedIn at the moment. I'm here for it.
I'm totally with you. I've been using it so much more recently. And also I find when I like log onto the homepage, 45 minutes has gone by and I'm still scrolling through and I'm like, what happened? I'm still here.
Yeah.
Like,
and interestingly, it's become my choice over Instagram. I go to Instagram before I go to LinkedIn before I go to Instagram. It's very interesting. So yeah, Instagram and LinkedIn, type in Alice Benham, you'll find me on both. And then, like I said, I've got a podcast. It's called Starting the Conversation. I love it. It's just my place to sit down with really cool people and have super honest and open conversations about what it's really like to run a business, much like you're doing in the social media union. So yeah, if you want to hear some interesting conversations and get a bit of expertise and encouragement from me, then you can go and have a listen to that. But yeah, that's me. This has been so much fun. Thank you for having me.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Well, thank you so much for
something from it.
Yeah, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I'm very grateful for it. Well, thank you so much to Alice, and make sure you go and follow her on social. And we will be back soon with our next episode. So make sure to check Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Social Media Union podcast, wherever you listen to. We'll speak to you soon.